Hey, y'all, you're listening to the Legacy, Lyrics, and Life podcast. I'm your host, Shawna Wells, your legacy architect. Welcome. This is the podcast where we'll uncover what legacy really means and the impact we can all have when we are present. Let's get started. Okay, y'all, welcome back. I have the opportunity today to talk to my sister, my friend, a dear colleague in the work of striving for a legacy aligned life. She is the founder and CEO of the Highland Project, and she is much more than that. She is a sister, she is a partner, she's an auntie, and she believes in building generational wealth for Black women. And I'm honored to call her my friend. So, Gabby, welcome to the show.
Hey, Shawna, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good.
Good. Tell me one thing that's bringing you joy right now.
I have a commitment to myself to twice a month. I have a writing and strategy Wednesday, which means no meetings, internal or external. And these aren't my strategy work blocks. I need to work on fundraising, but rather really with a goal of being generative and creative. And so today is Friday. I had my first writing Wednesday this week, and it was just beautiful. And it was beautiful because I feel like it was a culmination of putting together my learnings of what taps into my creativity. And so instead of sitting at my desk all day being like, right, Gabrielle, I started with movement. I wrote a little bit. I went into the park. I changed scenes. I went to a coffee shop, did some yoga. And who knows if what I wrote will ever see the light of day, but it was so generative. And yesterday, in a meeting I was having with my team members, so many of them just kept saying you have so many ideas today. You seem really refreshed today. And so it was a nice midweek pause to just collect myself and collect my dreams, whether they were about today or 100 years from now. I'm feeling that energy today. It has stuck with me.
Yeah. I love the intentionality behind that. And as with most conversations we have, I think they're meant to be. Because yesterday I went down this rabbit hole on daydreaming. And I just read a research study that says that, first of all, most of us spend about 40% of our time daydreaming, which is, I think, hard to believe. I'm like, no, I spent all my time thinking about what's next. And the power of when you spend time intentionally daydreaming, so you've carved out the time to just really look around, go for a walk, realize your surroundings, that the next days are actually some of the most productive for people. I just think it's a remarkable. Also, what are the odds that I read that study yesterday and then you said this? So, Gabby, tell us, I love to watch you live your legacy. It's one of my favorite things. So tell us the journey of your legacy.
You're making me blush and feel oddly self-conscious. I am in a moment where I feel a lot of ease in my legacy. And that's not to say that everything's perfect. Over my winter rest break, I just had a realization that every Black woman, I believe, sits on the edge of an emergent future that we deeply internalize, that the only constant is change. And I think that when we know we're in stride with our legacy is when we feel like we're sitting on the edge. And we're sitting on that edge still. We're sitting on that edge in community. And we're sitting on that edge not trying to change. And that's where I feel like I am right now. I feel like I started to step into my legacy from before I was born. I often would say to my mom, when I was in God's pocket, I heard, but I know that what my ancestors, including my modern day ancestors, seeded in me was a love for community. That is the Wyatt legacy. I grew up with my parents always having their neighbors over for the holidays. Even when they divorced, we brought together our families. And to this day, it is a merged family that's large at the holidays. It's that family that will ask you if you need a friend to come join you, or will take in that friend who doesn't have a place to go. And I was born into a family with a deep love for public service and a deep love, more specifically, frankly, for loving on the brilliance of Black and brown kids. Everyone in my family, my immediate family, is an educator. I'm the youngest of Shawna of 3 girls. And as the youngest, I do go to the beat of my own drum. And I knew I wanted to continue my family's legacy, but I wasn't really sure how. I really enjoyed play. I really enjoyed being a ham and creativity. I grew up in the arts, but I feel like the first legacy intervention or nudge I had was because of an educator and an artist. The artist was the late Bertolt Brecht, who was a Holocaust survivor. And he created Brechtian theater, a type of theater that was meant to make you so uncomfortable you'd leave to perform a political act. And I was in high school in my actor neutral every single day at a magnet school that was an hour from home. And I started to really realize where I was zoned to go to high school. And frankly, I was pissed. I wanted to get up in the middle of the show and leave because I just knew I was going to be all right if I didn't go there. And I felt really guilty about, did I take a seat from someone else from my community who deserved it more than me? And I had an educator who said, why don't you use your voice and do something with it? Run for school board. It's like, we don't even have SG at our school. Like, this is such a granola, crunchy thing. We don't even do that. But I did it. I ran for state student member. I got to the final two. I wasn't appointed. I ran again for Baltimore County Board that same year, got appointed. And it began a journey of never looking back. There was one of the first Black male superintendents in the district who really deeply valued that I truly had voting rights and my voice. And it was really probably the first example I saw of someone co-powering and ceding power to youth voice and most specifically to Black voice. And that really began to set me on a path of what does it mean to create a life where what I'm leaving behind are deep investments in the brilliance of our voice, in the brilliance of our power as Black people. And then I feel like there were these conveyor belt years that followed. Not that they weren't intentional and not that I don't value the lessons of them, but I think, and you've really helped me to have language for this, Shawna. I think that what occurred post high school was this constant manifestation of jobs and titles over purpose. And while I know I led purposeful work, and I'm proud of the work that I led in school systems and in foundations, there always was still a piece that didn't feel authentic to me. I think as Black women, our work will always be like so intertwined in everything about who we are and how we move in the world. And yet my work was what I said who I was. And so many parts of little Gabby school board member, Gabby in her actor neutral every day for the majority of her adolescence, they went away. And I think that the journey I began to like sit with right before shutdowns in New York was a question of, did I trust my own voice? Did I trust that I too had a vision? And was I willing to lead that vision that I saw for myself? And then I found you.
I'm like, it's coming.
And then I found you. Then I found Shawna Wells. But in all seriousness, I really did find Shawna Wells. And it was all because I had an incredible coach, Meg Ansara, at the time, who I think noticed in me this itching to figure out how to trust my voice and how to trust my gut. And so I had a real gift that I know not everyone had during the beginning and the following years of the pandemic, but I had this gift of stillness. I had this gift of trust from the organization I was at the time to begin to explore, frankly, what did I really want as a human and individual? I didn't realize that in full at the time. Instead, I thought about it as what's the thing I might create to add deeper value to this ecosystem for Black social justice leaders and more specifically for Black women. But the most beautiful part about that experience was really finding what I really needed all along in those systems. And so my journey into legacy really became being the prototype for what I was trying to create.
But somebody asked me the other day, like, why did you create B is for Black Brilliance? And I was like, you can read the story, but let me tell you just in a few sentences, or just one really is, I created it from the 10-year-old version of myself. And it's evolved since then, right? It is certainly not centered in only my experience. But in the beginning, the question I was asking myself stemmed from the deepest part of me that needed to be seen.
Yes, that's right.
So you said this, like, I was on a series of conveyor belts and I'm just like picturing these like alternative Gabbies. So do you think you need the conveyor belt moments to discover your ultimate legacy?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, let me play this out as I say this out loud. In the world that I imagine is here 7 generations from now, I don't think you need those moments because I actually believe that things like legacy curriculums exist in high schools and even lower, right? Lower levels. But when I think about where we are right now, I think those conveyor belt moments shine a mirror for you on what you really enjoy doing and not. I think it shines a mirror on you on the relationships in your life. Are they reciprocal relationships or not? I think they shine a light on, does that organizational budget represent the things you care about or not? There's something to, I believe, how we develop our persistence, frankly, as a Black community. And so with that, I'm naming, I believe that inherent in the conveyor belt is struggle and is adversity. And I think it builds in us, it built in me just this like very clear understanding that this conveyor belt wasn't imagined for me. And honestly, I had that click moment. I don't know if it was too late or not, but I had it when 2019 of that click moment. I think from there, I became much more generous. I stopped applying or jumping to short term solutions, but instead really started to say, let me actually decenter whiteness in this, on this conveyor belt, and just imagine the system I want to be in instead. Someone said to me recently, do you really think white people are thinking about you when they're designing their systems? And yet they can take up so much space in the Black and brown mind as we design ours. And it really moved me because I think the conveyor belt time taught me how to wield power. It taught me how to be subversive. And I'm really clear I'm using that experience now to imagine the world I want and use those tools to get there, but also be really clear they are not the only tools that exist. Forgetting that.
I do believe we all have these moments, right, that shape us and that give us the gifts of our future to and help us draft what our lives are going to create. And you talk about the moment that you started to realize that you had silenced your voice. Can you take us back to there? What was it like?
Scary as hell. And honestly, it was probably, it was probably snowball, to be honest, to be 100% honest. It probably was like 18 months of snowball moments. And then it probably was actually like 5 years of snowballed moments, but it was just frankly pattern recognition. So, I'll share, I would say midway through my first act of my career in education systems change, I found myself in incredibly poor health and I was in a high stress role in a large school district. And my relationships were like so fraught personally and professionally. And that was my moment when I said, I got to step out of this role. And I moved into a nonprofit and said, I'm going to focus on my wellness. And at that time, wellness to me meant sweat fitness. It was not really thinking about what is my mental health? What is my spiritual health? What's actually going to move me from a state of survival to thriving and feeling nourished? But nevertheless, it did help me get on track to like being a healthier human. And it was a moment of realizing that for my entire life until I stepped into education systems change, I had always been at issues of intersection, and from being in school for the arts to grad school, being with folks who were from so many different sectors. And then all of a sudden I was in this like siloed world. And I realized that didn't pique my curiosity. It didn't push my curiosity. It didn't challenge my thinking anymore. And I realized I deeply was questioning if I was imaginative enough to design solutions on the other side. And so that was scary. But how my like antidote for it was coaching. I chained up my coaching bench. I mentioned Meg before. I was like, I got to find a coach who's going to kick my ass and just set up for me like a short and simple process to help me to realize like what paths I can take. And that also it doesn't have to be a binary path. And she helped unearth in me that my ideas were worthy of being put on paper. And so I remember that first shutdown summer in New York, just like writing reams of paper about what I felt was missing for Black women social justice leaders. And I think it was Meg, it was certainly my husband, Jared, who just said, just pitch what you want. And what's the worst that will happen? You hear no. And at least then you have an answer on something of the many questions you're asking. And so that's what I did. I pitched going on, frankly, like an exploratory journey and leaving my role. And I pitched that part of that was doing it with you, Shawna, and having you there. I didn't know it at the time. I thought this woman is going to become hopefully my sister friend by the end of this. Number one goal. Number two, I'm going to learn some good stuff from her about leadership development and help me get out of my imposter syndrome like view of that. And we're going to have a good time. And what I certainly did not expect was like a complete excavation of like who I am and what I was doing with my life. But it brought so much comfort and joy. And ultimately, I'm glad I did it.
I wish y'all could see her face when she says that. But you gave us like, it's such a helpful, oftentimes I talk with people about legacy and there's something that's awry, right? There's something when I start coaching someone or I'm working with leaders, I'm working with a leadership team, there's something that's not right. And they're not sure legacy is the answer. And I'm like, it's fine. Like it's a big word. I get it. Let's define it. And what has been so beautiful about you is you're like, yeah, like let me hear about this legacy thing. And you already had it in you, of course, but you gave us such a beautiful articulation there of what wasn't right. You said, well, first, my relationships were awry. It wasn't what I wanted. You said my health wasn't great. It wasn't exactly what I needed it to be. I was less curious than I ever was. I was in a silo and I typically had been in intersections and we just like ignore all those things, right? Oh, we'll be fine. Like I'll handle that next week. And the antidote is like, no, you have to figure out instead of that title you keep chasing, you got to figure out the legacy you're after. And I think a lot of people could look at you and say, and not understand that part of the journey and the intimate nature of how many conversations you had to have with yourself and with other people to unwind that. And, we talk about this all the time about like how uncomfortable that is sometimes, right? It's shit, like I've devoted myself to this life. And now I want this one that I can't even articulate. And some people don't understand that.
You aced your own question.
Yeah.
And I think like that excavation and like just cyclical nature continues. And I think that's the thing I want to name for like listeners is the greatest challenge that I have in my legacy right now is like just because I'm feeling good doesn't mean that I can stop my practices of identifying, am I moving in alignment? Does something need to be shed? Does a mindset of mine need to be shifted? Does a relationship need to end? Yes, you've gotten so far with this re-envisioning or reimagining of your legacy in the last 18 months, but you've got to change up the next set of tools and resources to get you through the next tranche. Like it is certainly not an uphill battle. I like to think about it as like these moments on the Highland of realizing you climbed, enjoying it, and then knowing you're going to go back down and come right back up again. And like in that down and up, in that liminal space, there's like a lot of work that continues. And that like top work is that inner work. When I launched Highland was never comfortable saying the following. And now I'm like always saying it, which is like everything begins and ends with a sustained Black woman. And last year I just started saying to myself, everything begins and ends with a sustained Gabrielle. And that's that work in that liminal space that like does not stop. It doesn't stop to realize your legacy.
Yes. Yes. I've said a few times in this conversation and others, like, I love to watch you live your legacy. And it's like the big moments I'm like right next to you as a hype crew member. What is beautiful about watching you live your legacy? It's those big moments when like all of the things are happening and we're excited about the next cohort. But it's also how you write in your notebook. It's like how you doodle. Gabrielle doodles, right? And she like doesn't use the lines on the page. It's all of the ways that you have accepted who you are becoming. And I know that seems silly, but it's like, it's what you choose to wear and it's how you choose to show up and it's what you choose to say yes to and no to. So I wonder, what are the small things that you've realized help you live your legacy and help you live in alignment?
The things that help me live in alignment, hands down, I really do take a sleep schedule seriously. I take it extremely seriously. And that's not to sound trite, But you know this about me, Shauna. I love to bend time. And bending time for me means I've always known my entire life on this earth that I love mornings. I'm at my best in the mornings. And so I try to bend time of like, how can I be really present as the sun comes up and continues to rise? And so I'm an early riser, and that's to do like the work of Gabrielle. And that work of Gabrielle, I guess, is piece two, which is like manifesting and living stillness in different ways. I'm a yogi. I'm one who sits in silence, but that's my morning practice. I have a morning gratitude practice, ever small or large. I like to be still in nature. It is like pretty rare that a day doesn't go by when I haven't taken a walk without my headphones on to notice what's around me, what chooses to be seen. And I'm like a dork about it. I love whether it's a bird or I'm like, I haven't seen the tree look that way before. I'm going to go look it up or I'm going to find a book about it because this thing called Mother Earth is going to be here in some way, shape, or form after me. And she was here before me. And I think there's lessons in that. I think there's lessons in how when we're at our best, we can pass something on. And when we're not being treated well, we can continue to live and survive. I think really understanding that if I'm going to add something to my list, even my closet, something has to come off. And like, I really internalize that now. I remember hearing that a lot in my like mid 20s, in leadership seminars or whatever, but it never felt meaningful or like I could accomplish it. And I just started getting in a pattern of just saying, what's that one thing? And then trying it for a whole week, right? And just noticing that stick and then trying it for another week longer and not focusing on like 5 things to take off my list, but just getting really good at taking one thing off. And then maybe later I can start adding more things to that list of not to do's. It hasn't been easy, but really examining the relationships that are serving me. And I say it hasn't been easy because I think the hardest relationships to say, I love you and are the ones that did serve you at a certain point and actually gave you gifts, helped you to create things. And also, they might have served a place and time. And you can still love on people, but change what that love looks like to step into realizing and living your legacy. So I think that's like I don't know, that's my hard and easy list. I think in the hard and ending in the hardest, arguably.
Yeah, we've talked about this, but the hype crew surround yourself with is important. You can't be who you were then. So part of being who you were then is figuring out who then do we have to move away from with a lot of reverence and love and respect, but move into a different reality of possibility because as you change and your legacy changes, you got to see more. How do I figure out what chooses to be seen in my life over and over and over again?
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, the only last thing I'll say is actually, I think the hardest part of that relationship part was like the relationship with myself. And I'm a lot more comfortable being by myself now than I was, 3 years ago of being quiet with myself. I'm an extrovert. Recently, I've been wondering if I'm shifting into an introvert, but I love being around people. But I think part of this journey really was figuring out what it meant to love myself and care on myself and be quiet with myself.
What do you think was hard about that? Because I'm like, yeah, sis, I get it.
What do I think was hard about it? I would say that I don't know if you're allowed to curse on this thing, but probably 90% of it was my own shit, right? And accumulated trauma. And, a combination of like imposter syndrome, of always primarily growing up in white environments and like viewing beauty or brilliance as being different from what I was offering or serving up. I think it was being often the youngest and like brownest person in the room in academic institutions and in workplaces and being loved on and then being a threat. And that like these real things that I don't think we talk about enough publicly as women of color leaders, as Black women leaders. And I think that accumulated for me to just say, like, you're not worthy of something. You're specifically not worthy of the same love that you're trying to put out to others to give that to yourself. Dr. Gail Parker says often, I am worthy of my own care. And that is what I think probably the isolation of the pandemic forced me to realize was that I am worthy of my own care. And if I'm not caring on myself, no one else is. No one knows how to really love on you more than you. They can be your hype folks to like remind you, right? Or like bring you tea and soup when you're sick, but they might not know really why you're sick.
They don't have all the accumulated storylines. There's only one you. So you're evolving as we all are. And you're in this phase where you started this conversation with ease. I said, tell me one thing that's bringing you joy. And you said, there's some ease right now. What are the nuggets or the benefits that you've realized come with living your legacy?
Joy. There's just like pure satisfaction. Honestly, even when something goes horribly wrong. Like, I just think, it's when you say, oh, I'm here with you for those big public milestones, Gabby. But like now I'm like, sure, like I certainly celebrate them now. I used to never celebrate milestones. And so like that like celebration moment. But it's because I've figured out now how to celebrate along the way and celebrate along the way when we're like, oh, we messed up this. We got to fix this before this, right? Or like my slip's out. We got to like clean it up. There's just such hyper awareness. Yeah, I think when you're living your legacy, you're awake. And so you notice things differently. And I think when you start to feel the joy, when you start to feel the satisfaction, that awareness like keeps getting like hype even more and more and more. It gets amplified. And so I would like to think that you just start knowing when this has to end or you need more of this. Like the like routine is built up a lot more. That's what it feels like. You feel pride. I mean, I remember last year constantly, whether it was a funder or a board member or a friend, just being like, how's it going? And I was like, I just feel a lot of pride. And yes, I know the world's on fire, but you can't take away from me what we've built this year and what actually went behind the building. So it is that pride. It is this like healthy level of discomfort of the unknown. Yeah, those are my words.
Yeah. Yeah. When you started talking, I smiled because when you've met someone who's living their legacy, you're like, yeah, you're living your legacy. It's different. The energy is different. The light is different. Instead of asking questions that are like generating surface answers, we're actually talking, right? We're connecting. And someone who's living their legacy can also maintain a really uncomfortable conversation for longer because you're like, listen, I'm living my legacy. You live yours over there. What a beautiful set of reflections you share with us. And the question that everyone is like, here's why I came is I want to answer this question about the lyric that most aligns to your legacy. What comes to mind when I ask you that question?
I was like slightly dreading it when I had booked this to record. And then it came so naturally to me when I was like thinking this morning. I'm a Pelotoner and I was on the Peloton, and in front of our Peloton are all of my father's records. And it's like hundreds of his records. And I immediately was like, oh, this is so simple. The song is Mercy, first played by Cannonball and his quintet in like something like 1966, 1965. And if you know him, which Shawna does, it is a jazz ensemble that's such this rhythmic gospel meets rock meets jazz song. But in the beginning, the record that we have is his live recording, the first recording. And he has this speech in the beginning, and everyone's warming up. And he just keeps saying in many different ways, sometimes we're not prepared for adversity. And he says it like multiple times. Sometimes you're not prepared and you're wondering, what do you do when that takes over? And he's like, you just have it like, dee. So it's not song, it's not a lyric, but it's like, dee, 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 dee. And it moves me every time. And it means it's so much more than a song to me. These are my dad's records, which are a part of his legacy and his love. And when I got married, my husband, for like multiple years, had photographed all of these albums of these records, these record albums, and bound them into books for me. And he never met my father. And he wrote this thing. I won't share it because that feels like his privacy. But he wrote, a letter about never meeting him, but what he thought he would be like in the moment of that day. And I remember, as New York was shutting down, we were so scared about what was going to happen. And that was one of the first records like we took out and played that song. And it just became that like song of the last 4 years that, at least once a month gets cranked up on a record player, probably at 10 p.m. after some good wine. Sometimes our best friends on our block, Judy and Steve, who are like, sorry, Judy and Steve, they're multiple generations ahead of us. They come and they sit and they listen to it too. And you just see like history, like you see history unfold. So that is much longer than a lyric of what you wanted. And I'm sorry for crying and talking too long, but it is such a beautiful song. And you should play it and add it to your playlist. I have spoken.
You've spoken. You have been heard. It's a beautiful relationship that we can have with music that can say more than our words. And so thank you for bringing that into the space. And most importantly, for bringing your dad into the space. It's always fun. And I'm sure we'll talk right after this about how it went. And I really appreciate you and my world and in my children's world and in the world of Black women, and more importantly, in the world of what we will do. So thank you. Can you tell folks where they can find you and make sure you mention the Stillness Ranger?
Oh, obviously, you should first one love equally back on Shawna. Shawna really has been, the co-founder of the Highland Project. And yeah, just opened my doors and my eyes to what I'm walking in. And I thank you for that. You can find me at the Stillness Ranger on Instagram, which is my wanderings, and doodling in Central Park and more on how nature can heal and help us step into our legacy. You can follow me at Lead Highland on Instagram as well to really see the beautiful work of countless Black women across the country.
Thank you for listening to Legacy, Lyrics, and Life. We hope you'll join us on the next episode as we continue to expand and explore life through legacy. If you know someone else who would enjoy this show, be sure to share. Always a pleasure. Until next time.